Our culture is rapidly changing, especially in the area of technology and social media. So how do we as parents keep up with our kids? And how do we help them navigate and make good choices in an increasingly online world? I'm here today with Carey Nieuwhof, author, speaker, lead pastor at Connexus Community Church in Barrie, Ontario, to talk about this area of family life that many of us parents are trying to find our way through. Welcome, Carey.
Hey, it's great to be here. Thanks, Maggie.
So we're talking about technology. Should parents be afraid of technology? Should we be afraid?
You know what? You have to pay attention.
Yeah.
And I try not to be a fear monger when it comes to technology. I mean, it's probably not going away.
Yeah.
It's probably here to stay. And the reality is you have to navigate it. So there is some fear and trembling, but there's also great opportunity with it as well.
Okay, so most of our viewers know that I have an 8-year-old and a 2-year-old. And our 8-year-old is now wading into that world of technology and realizing that the internet exists. And
Right.
he has a little iPod. What is age appropriateness for all of these things, all of these devices? So he has an iPod,
Yeah.
he has a friend that has an iPhone, grade 3. Is this, like, what's the right age?
That is a great question. And you know what? The answer is it keeps dropping.
Yeah.
It just keeps dropping. And I think it's a little bit dependent on the child.
Okay.
So I have kids who are a little bit older. Mine are 23 and 19.
Yep.
So it was easier to have kids back in the day because you had a computer
Yeah.
and dial-up internet and it sat in a public area and you didn't worry about it and people didn't carry around a phone in their pocket.
Right.
So I think it keeps shifting. And I think the challenge with technology, and I've heard this said before, we're its creator, but we're also its child. In other words, we're the parent. We created something, but we don't really know what it's doing to us. So the jury is still out, but the challenge is it's happening in real time.
Yeah.
And I think the biggest challenge for kids is that when you get an iPod Touch,
Yep.
you get the world.
Yeah.
I mean, basically, it's a
At your
smartphone
fingertips.
without a phone.
Yeah.
And so you get everything good and everything bad associated with constant connection online. And the question is your child ready for that? And are you ready for that as a parent? And so I think there definitely have to be limits. There definitely has to be a lot of supervision from parents. But you're going to get different answers. You know, we pick ages like 16, you're ready to drive.
Yeah.
Well, there are definitely probably some 14-year-olds who are ready to drive and some 25-year-olds who are not ready to drive. We just pick arbitrary ages. I think technology flexes a little bit more. And so the answer is, well, maybe, but, you know, fasten your seatbelts because here we go.
So what are those things that we should look at when we're thinking about, you know, is our child ready for, you know, technology? Are they ready to get an iPod? What's kind of the checklist that we should be going through in our mind?
I think you have to look at their maturity level. I think you have to look at their responsibility level when it comes to doing what they said they were going to do. You'll probably have house rules. You know, a good rule would be for younger kids or even preteens, no phones in your bedroom would be a great one. You know, they charge in an open space overnight.
Yep.
No phones at the table. There are guidelines and restrictions and so on. But like, is this a child who's going to sneak around it or what? So I think that's definitely a guideline. And the other is, are you able to have meaningful conversations with your child?
Yeah.
Because, I mean, we used to get exposure to things as we got older. So
Right.
speaking as pretty much any parent, because, you know, smartphones weren't even really around
No.
8 years ago and certainly not accessible. So all of us who are now parents, we remember, okay, there's, you know, you could have gotten into porn, but you had to work at it at 12 or 13. But all of a sudden it was more accessible at 18 or 19, or certainly by the time you got to college. But by that point, your character had hopefully developed to the point where you could make decisions. Well, when you put that kind of access into the hands of an 8-year-old, the character needs to develop a lot faster. And are you ready to do that as a parent? It's complex. And I think, you know, people who have several children like you do, you go, well, so-and-so was mature at 8, but this person's still immature at 10.
Right.
And so your answer might vary depending on the child or depending on your home.
So you're telling us that we shouldn't just hide our child in the room and banish all technology?
Well, you can try that. You know, it might work, because I know one of
they're
the
about 20, or, you know.
one of the impulses, right, is you just want to go Amish, and
Yes.
it's like, okay, we're going to cut all electricity.
Right.
There's no Wi-Fi in our
Yeah,
home. Nobody
just
gets a
running water,
phone.
that's it.
Running water and the Pony Express to deliver mail.
Exactly.
That's what we're going to do, and you can do that. And I'm not saying you shouldn't do that, but here's the reality: we do live in 2015. your child is going to leave your house and go next door.
Yeah.
And next door, there's a 7-year-old with an iPhone 6. What do you do? Because if you're not having that conversation in your home, and again, respect your home rules, just know that they are one doorstep away from running into that world, and they're certainly going to find it at school. And so then what do you do? Because if you just ignore it, they're going to have to make the decisions that they have to make without your guidance. It is not an easy conversation to have. It's not an easy situation to navigate, but you're just going to have to navigate it as a parent. And I think it really gets down to the character of your child, which has to become much more mature at a much earlier age.
So the conversation, when you talk about conversations, when we're talking about Facebook and we're talking about Snapchat and Instagram, where people are posting everything and anything, what is that conversation that we have with our children when it comes to just being careful with what you post and how much do you post and just your self-worth, not feeling that it's all wrapped up in social media?
I think to some extent it's age dependent. With an 8-year-old, you've got to talk about stranger danger. You've got to talk about, we need to know everything, all the passwords. I think that's something you can use throughout the teen years. And with one of my sons, we still share an iTunes account. So if an app shows up on his phone in Halifax, it actually shows up on my phone. I know what he's downloading. Now, I don't know everything. That's one way to control it. Another way, though, is you got to become a little bit savvy. So, for example, a lot of preteens will be on Instagram. And there is a whole world around Instagram that parents can miss. So there are lots of teenagers who, if they don't get 50 likes on their image that they just posted within 10 minutes, they feel horrible about themselves. They take it down. They think, I have no friends. I have no life. There is, and again, you can Google this, but there is a whole code that goes on in Instagram. So for example, there was a party and all of your daughter's friends were tagged, but your daughter wasn't tagged, which is really a message saying, you're not popular, we don't like you. And I mean, it's devastating. It's crushing kids. Or there's bullying that happens online. And so it's the same kind of conversations you want to have with your kids, except everything is amplified, right? Instead of happening at the schoolyard, this can happen after school, it can happen at night, and you might not even know what's going on. And your kids might be feeling bad about what's happening. You have to be able to have that conversation with them, and they need to feel comfortable talking to you, right? I love what Andy Stanley says as a parent. You freak out on the inside, not on the outside. Because if you're freaking out all the time going, ah, they clam up. And that's really hard for me as a dad, not to freak out on the outside, because I freak out.
Yeah, we all do. Community, how important is that? To not always be the parent, the uncool parent that's saying, don't go on this and don't go on that, but having a community of people who can pour into your child and say, again, your worth is not based on your Instagram account. Yeah,
that's so important, Maggie. And I think that's huge because as a parent, you already know this with an 8-year-old and a 2-year-old, you have a very influential voice, but sometimes your kids listen to other voices better. And so I've always encouraged parents to develop a wider circle. So for example, if you're involved in a church and you have a small group leader, we try to cue our small group leaders at Connexus Church to have those social media conversations with kids to help them try to navigate that, because sometimes kids will tell a non-parent things that they won't tell a parent. And if you can trust that source and have that kind of voice in your child's life, that's fantastic. The other thing would be develop some mentors in their lives, some adults who can speak into their development so that you're not bearing the weight alone as a parent. And I think when you get the multiplicity of voices around you, your child is kind of protected and you've got other people praying for them, building into them, and where they start to have a dialogue and they realize, okay, you know what, there's some good things out there and there really are some great things out there. And then there's some bad things, and I've got a group of people around me that I can have the conversation with.
And I think it's also a challenge for us as parents to pour into our child spiritually and know and give them that sense of, again, of self-worth, knowing that they're meant for more, and maybe spending more time with their kids, right? Because sometimes I think when kids are going to social media, they are looking for that attention, and maybe they're not getting it at home, and so they're looking in other areas. What is that challenge for us as parents?
Yeah, I think that's a great challenge. And you know, the way I look at it is you should definitely have externally imposed rules. But those externally imposed rules only last so long. Because at some point your child leaves home. And internally owned values are far more powerful than externally imposed rules. And that's what happened to us, right? We left home and suddenly 18, 19, 20 years old, you can do whatever you want. Your parents are probably not going to find out. And even if they do, well, you're an adult now, right? There are hopefully things inside you, your character and your faith, that say, you know what, I could do that, but I'm not going to. And the same is true on your iPod Touch. The same is true on your phone. There's lots of bad things I can do on my phone. I don't do them. Why don't I do them? Because that's not what I want my life to be about. Now, we just have to accelerate that conversation with our children and make it happen faster. And that conversation is beginning in real time because we didn't even have this problem 5 years ago.
Yeah. Carrie, why is parenting so hard?
Because you got it all figured out by the time they leave home. That's why. No, you don't. I promise you that's not true.
Thank you, so
it's
much,
hard.
Carrie. Yeah, it really is a challenge. And so where can we find you? You have a website?
I do. It's just my name, carrienewhoff.com.
Okay.
Our church, connexuschurch.com, and you can find us there.
And you have a couple of parenting books as well.
I do. I wrote a book a few years ago with Reggie Joyner called Parenting Beyond Your Capacity. It's available on Amazon and online. And then I also wrote another book on change called Leading Change Without Losing It. That's also available.
Great. And they're also available at our e-store as well.